Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of From the Soapbox. For the first time ever, I have two guests on this episode, and they are financial advisors Tom Seeko and CJ Burnett, co-founders of Florida Veterinary Advisors. They're also co-hosts of the Smarter Vet podcast and co-authors of the book Unleashed: The Financial Clarity Every Veterinarian Needs. They have been working with veterinarians since 2014 to manage both personal and business finances by helping them create financial plans, protect their income, and pay down debt. They are also both certified exit planners, meaning they help veterinary practice owners figure out how they will move on from their businesses when the time is right. And that's what I talked with them about on this episode. I asked them to weigh in on some questions that were submitted by veterinarians so that we could get some expert advice on how and when to start exit planning, alternatives to selling to a corporate consolidator, and why it's important to play the long game with these kinds of things as much as possible. We talked about exit strategies like selling to associates and owner financing, but they said no matter which path you take, the most important thing is to be in the best possible personal financial situation so that you'll be okay no matter what ends up happening. These two don't sugarcoat anything, they tell it like it is, but there's a lot of great information and inspiration that can help you start on your own path. So without further ado, getting their time to talk from the soapbox, Tom Seeko and CJ Burnett. Okay, we have Tom Seeko and CJ Burnett. Thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast today.
It's great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, this will be my first time having two guests, so I'm very excited to have both of you here. And this is also the first time I think we've had like some crowdsourced questions to ask you two. So I'm excited to be able to answer some questions that some members of our community and other veterinarians, some burning questions that they want answers to. So thank you for being here with us.
Let's go.
I'm kind of nervous and excited at the same time. So I guess we'll see as we get into this how it unfolds,
I think
right?
it's all going to be good. No, we don't have any like gotcha questions here for you. So I think it'll be all right up your alley.
I think this is the first time we're doing this without getting the questions in advance, so it's even more of a
little bit of a
fun.
Mystery here, but
all right,
it's all going to be good.
Go.
It's all going to be good. Okay, so I just want to give everyone a little background. So you are financial planners that focus specifically on veterinarians and the veterinary industry. I'm just curious about if you could kind of give all us a little bit of background in terms of how that came about, how you decided to focus on veterinarians and the veterinary medicine industry to be sort of the focus of your business. Whoever would like to go first. CJ, do you want to start off?
Yeah. Well, I know that as far as why vets in particular, it was a combination. It was by accident on purpose, I would say. Tom really felt like veterinarians were a community he wanted to serve. And to be honest, I was like, okay, like I'm along for the ride. Let's kind of investigate this. And Tom was very passionate about it. So I'm kind of one of those guys, like when someone's passionate about something, I kind of get excited too. So then the more we investigated vet med in particular, we noticed that a lot of veterinarians, they either didn't have the education around it, or they themselves had professionals that they were relying on that they weren't really sure how to know if a professional was helping them to the degree that they needed it. And so because of a lot of that confusion, it seemed fairly easy for us to kind of plug and play, so to speak. And so we started talking to conferences, talking to groups of veterinarians, and the more feedback we got of, hey, this stuff is really needed in our industry. You guys need to be in front of more people. And then those vets got us in front of more people. And then we started adding clients as vets. And then our clients just took off with veterinary medicine. And then over time, kind of seeing the burnout, kind of seeing a lot of the more of the concerns just as people, because I think, vets are people first. And that's how I view them. I view them as people first and veterinarians second. And, seeing a lot of what they struggle with, even with the Not One More Vet Foundation being out there. I mean, our hearts grew for the community the more that we understood about the community. And then it went from, hey, let's see if we can help this community, to, oh my gosh, let's dedicate our business to helping this community, because it felt very purposeful and just right.
One of the silly responses to this is, yes, I love animals. I thought it'd be cool to talk with people that love animals too. So that was a tremendous opportunity to have conversation. And what is it? 11 years later, and we're growing strong, and wrote a book. We have a podcast, so many things that we're up to. And I think we're in over 40 states now, which is pretty incredible when I think back to it.
So you have to be licensed in each state that you offer your services in individually.
Correct.
That's very much like veterinarians.
100%.
Where we have to be licensed in each state. We can't just.
And there are some states that require extra continuing education as well.
Right.
Like we do one and they're like, yeah, we'll accept this in 5 different states. And then there's one state that like, we want you to do like 30 hours of education every year. And we're like, oh, that's fun. Thanks.
Yeah. And we actually carry a handful of licensing because we do a lot, we're a holistic financial advisory firm. So we incorporate a lot of different pieces into the mix on purpose because there were some product lines, financial product lines that just simply other advisors either don't know about or they don't service. And so, seeing a lot of the potential need in those areas where it's like people need fill in the blank X, Y, Z, but no one knows anyone that can do X, Y, and Z. We were like, hey, you know what? Let's fill in that gap and let's go get those licensing. So we have multiple licenses on top of just keeping track of the states that we're licensed in.
That sounds a lot like veterinarians, both in the aspect of having to kind of be licensed, to have different educational requirements, to maintain those licenses, to get those licenses, and also just having to be the individual who, in a lot of circumstances, fulfills all the needs that a particular pet and their family has. So-and-so needs a dental extraction, they can't afford, or they don't have access to a veterinary dentist. Well, okay, we need to have those skills. And if we don't currently have them, we go out and go to a conference and we acquire those skills, or we find a mentor and find another way to have access to those skills. So yeah, see a lot of crossover there.
On the note about skills, because of our high level planning that we do with people, I will say that we charge a planning fee to work together. And where it really goes here is that we've had to get so diverse in many different subject matters. Granted, we're not licensed in every area and we're not an expert in all of them. Like we're not accountants or attorneys or lenders. However, we've gotten so knowledgeable in those areas that we really want to be able to help people make smart financial decisions and really create really good habits and behaviors along the way. So it's like when you think about, we don't want to just look at like a part, like even like I think of human medicine here. Human medicine is so good with, hey, we have all these different specialists that just focus on all these different areas. And we're more of like when they're actually talking, there's holistic doctors out there today where they consider just giving you a medication or selling you a product. They're trying to look at everything, the whole body, to make sure that like, hey, if I do something or I give you this, like, could it trigger something else? And is this decision I'm making today going to put me in a better or worse spot than later on? And it's a lot to keep up with, but we're always trying to give people an experience that they can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, our mission is to provide a different way of thinking to make financial decisions easy so they can spend time doing more of the things that they love. You'll hear us say that multiple times. I think every podcast we probably say that we issue. So I think if we can provide a different way of thinking to make financial decisions easy for people so they can spend more time doing the things that they love, then it should be a pretty good experience.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know of many people who really love thinking about money. So finances.
Which is funny because it's like if you ask the fish if they were in water, I don't know they even know that they're in water, but like if you think about it, like we literally make money decisions every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
When you go to Starbucks, that's a financial decision, right? When you get in a car, that's a financial decision. When you buy a home, it's a financial decision. When you pay your mortgage, it's a financial decision. Like we make multiple financial decisions per day, and most people never really even compute the fact that when they spend $5 at Starbucks, they're not spending $5. They're spending $5 plus everything that $5 could have grown to had they invested it.
True.
So there's a lot of opportunity that is just kind of missed by the general public, not even just vets. It's just the general public misses this. And I think veterinarians who are insanely smart, insanely brilliant, it's not a lack of knowledge. I think it's a lack of knowledge and understanding to how what they're operating in translates into how, like, what it could do for them. Right. In other words, we thought more information was going to help everybody. Come to find out, it actually just confuses a lot more things. So we exist mostly to help narrow down the scope of that information, to help people translate how information directly converts to the purpose and how it's used in their life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you were saying, kind of there are some things that are just kind of things that everyone struggles with in terms of financial decisions. But I was curious, kind of more specifically to veterinary medicine, are there some aspects of financial and business planning? Because I know that's a lot of what you do that are very unique to like the veterinary industry, to veterinary practices that are maybe different from like, if you're talking not so much about the individual, but like the business, from a business perspective, are there a lot of elements of financial planning that are very different for the veterinary industry?
I think one of the best ways to look at this is like if you make money, you probably have very similar struggles and challenges that a lot of other people have. I know in veterinary medicine there are little quirks and there's things to know and understand to really connect the dots and just understand like how does a business run and how does it collect revenue and when they go to sell the business, like what does that process look like and what could they get for it. I will say when it comes to planning as a whole, there are so many people that will hire someone and they sort of like address like a symptom that they have. And I think about it like our industry, a lot of the times people are like, I want a retirement account or a 401k. I've got a person that's important to me. So they go buy life insurance on them for key person insurance. They start trying to inject money back into their business and they don't know what the true impact is on their net income. And they're constantly just making decisions to where at the very end of this, there are a lot of people we've talked to that are at the later phase of their career and they're like, I want to get out of the business. And the dependency that they have, one, on that business to provide their future, and then two, the lack of understanding of what that transition looks like and how they're going to produce income from that sale. And a lot of what we're helping people do is really start grounding them on the personal side of like, what does your personal financial life need to then understand how does your business support your personal plan versus letting your business be your financial plan. And in a perfect world, the goal would be here is that your business is like a cherry on the top of cake. And it's everything else has been accounted for. Your plan is good. And theoretically, you could just hand the keys to your building and say, hey, take it over. It's yours now. And that's where we come in here with people to like, how do we create that clear distinction between the two of them? So like personal isn't business and business is personal. Like it's all, there's a segmentation that's there. And there's actually a plan in place of like, if I'm going to take money and put it in a spot, is it putting me ahead or is it putting me behind? And what is this really doing? And like, I even think one thing that's coming to my mind right now is taxes. People always keep talking about taxes and they put money into, a qualified retirement account to then eventually have to take it out later. And the question is like, was that a good move or a bad move? Like if you're going to be in a spot where your income is going to be a lot less when you retire and taxes stay the same where they are, it's probably a good move. If taxes go up and you're going to make more money when you retire, well, it might be a bad move. And it's all relative depending on the context of where you're going. So like we help connect a lot of those dots along the way.
And there's probably three things that I would add to that. I think vet med is to a certain degree different in its perception of risk. And what I mean by that is there's a very deep misunderstanding within business ownership, especially as far as how much risk they take. Sometimes they think their business is really risky. Sometimes they don't. Banks perceive veterinary medicine to be very, very, very low risk, right? The level of default is very, very low. Which banks, they're banks, insurance institutions, and investment institutions. Those are the three, I would say, kind of institutions to watch for when you're trying to understand risk. Like how do they see risk? How do they perceive that risk? And so I think a lot of veterinarians, they either come to us, they think that they're taking too much risk or they think they're taking too little, and they're not exactly sure how to measure that risk. So I think that's something that is very, I'd say very unique to vet med to a certain degree. Another one is since veterinarians tend to always be putting out fires, there's not enough time to really slow down and reflect. I think it was John C. Maxwell who one time said, experience without reflection is useless. And so when you think of like you have an experience, if we don't slow down enough to reflect on that experience and okay, what am I learning? How do I adopt? How do I change my business? If I have employee turnover, why is that? How much of that am I contributing versus maybe my employees are contributing, Is it the culture? Is it the mentality of the area? Like kind of just really reflecting on what changes need to be made within the practice and thinking not just from a quantitative perspective, but also from a qualitative perspective. And then another thing, I think there's a big misunderstanding between freedom within someone's finances and financial freedom. Having freedom within someone's finances is something that can be accomplished almost immediately because you have a plan that has a plan when nothing goes according to plan. So you find freedom within your finances that should be on its way, building towards what we would call financial freedom. Financial freedom is like literally the business could go away. You could have like complete devastation around in the economy, in your life, and you still have enough money on your balance sheet to produce the income that you need for the rest of your life, regardless of how long you're going to live. And so I think people are yearning for financial freedom, but they're not sure how to get it. And if veterinarians, specifically practice owners, can really focus on what are the things that I can control and how do I find freedom within my finances today, then usually winning that short game is going to automatically win the long game.
Very interesting. I see a lot of more parallels between veterinary medicine and what you're talking about in terms of, having kind of like a proactive wellness plan, kind of like a holistic sort of a preventive strategy versus, just kind of treating the little conditions that come up along the way, or just picking a few things and saying, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to worry about that. Just having a plan, and like you said, knowing where you stand with things, because I think in veterinary medicine we like to have a lot of evidence. We like to really feel good about the decisions that we're making, and we like to have them sort of backed by some kind of proof, or if we can't find that, we like to go to an expert. That's why we're always going to CE, we're always consulting with specialists and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I see a lot of parallels there and that way of thinking. So hopefully that'll be helpful to those out there listening who are trying to kind of understand the importance of financial planning in the work that they do.
Looking for the latest veterinary news? Stay ahead of the curve with stories from the American Animal Hospital Association's digital, award-winning newsroom, Trends. We're bringing you fresh stories every day, covering everything from the cutting-edge clinical insights to helpful practice management tips. And it's not just articles. Watch videos, check out interactive charts, and learn more about the people shaping our industry. As an AHA member, you also unlock exclusive members-only content designed to help you and your team thrive. Visit aha.org/trends today and sign up for Trendsetter, our newsletter where all of our stories are delivered to your inbox twice a week.
And there was a term that I've heard attributed to the work that you do, and I've heard it before, that I wanted to try to understand, because I think it'll have to do with some of the questions that we're going to answer here today, and that's exit planning. The idea of exit planning, sort of planning your exit from your business. I guess the first thing, because you are certified exit planners, is that the right way to say it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
When should a practice owner start their exit planning?
Planning for my exit has less to do with selling the business and more with creating a plan on what to do without the business. In other words, I want to create freedom within my finances without having to rely on the sale of my practice. Because at that point, being able to decide who buys my practice or who I give my practice, I can literally give my practice away and my personal financial plan is going to be okay. Having that financial freedom is very, very different than what a lot of business owners are going after. A lot of business owners are trying to pump as much money and reinvest as much money into their business to make their business their personal plan.
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever, not that I've asked this question of anybody, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, I could just give my practice away and I'd be fine. Like, are there many people in that situation? Because I haven't heard them express it.
We've had a few where people came to us and either they had already spent maybe a decade or two building up personal assets, and we just came in and just help aid their ability to retire earlier because they were already on the track to retire at the time that they needed to. But a lot of the times having a plan on what I'm going to do with the business, because like a lot of people will reinvest in their business without knowing the actual rate of return that's going to be generated from that reinvestment.
Right.
Right. They buy a machine or they do something and they probably did. Sometimes it's because their CPA told them to. They needed more deductions in order to meet some sort of, imaginary threshold that the IRS set for them. Right. And so people are pushed to take on more expenses than they necessarily did. They called it an investment, but it's really not. And so what ends up happening is the rate of return of those reinvested cash flows really doesn't translate into more practice value. And so if people say, hey, well, should I reinvest in my business or should I save money on my personal balance sheet? The answer is always yes, both. Do it at the same time. Tom and I are not people that tend to negotiate with ourselves even. It's like, if I want to do something, how do I figure out a plan to do both of what I'm looking to do, as opposed to picking one over the other? Because picking one over the other sometimes puts us in a predisposition in how we think. It's from a scarcity mindset as opposed to an abundance mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we reposition how we're approaching things to not can I do this, but how can I do this? Oftentimes we show clients how they will be able to build enough personal wealth where selling the business becomes an option. It doesn't become a requirement. And some people, they plan to hold on their business until they die. There's 3 ways to exit. And some people plan to hold it till they die. And then, or they plan to give it to their child because their child is going to make it through vet school and that's their succession plan. And so there's a lot of that. Then that opens up a whole nother can of worms as far as estate planning and finding equal and fair value for all of the siblings and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot that goes into figuring out how an exit plan should be, and it's completely custom.
So the 3 ways, sorry, I just wanted one follow-up question and then I'll go to you, Tom. So 3 ways to exit are to sell it, give it away, or die? Or you mentioned the 3 ways.
The 3 ways that you can transition, it's either you sell it to an employee, you sell it to an outside person, it could be an investor, corporation, whatever it is, or you keep it till you die. That's really the only ways that you go about it. Something I did want to point out here, and just to put some color to it, the prior generation of veterinarians, a lot of them got into ownership when there wasn't a lot of focus on business acumen. And a lot of it was just like they practiced medicine, they opened the doors, they just started doing things and it worked.
Right.
And then over time, the guidance has always been like, hey, the business does well, I take some money out of the business, and a lot of it just gets put back into the business. And then the plan is to sell that practice to then retire. Like that's been the mentality for a very long time. And if we really think about it, let's say that we have a practice, someone who's 40 years of age, and that business is doing $250,000 a year of profits. Because I think it's really important to point this out here. Like when you really think of it, $250,000, if nothing changes and everything stays the same, let's say for 20 years, they're going to make $5 million in profits. That business, if you're going to sell it on paper, you're probably looking at $1 million to $1.5 million. So like what happens over time here is this, like you've got that $5 million of earnings. Where's it going? And a lot of the times it gets kind of like people are just not a very good steward of the money in the business, and it just goes places and it doesn't generate to increase more profits or increase the value. Maybe they put it in their life and they consumed it, and they say they're not big spenders, but they bought a lot of things. Like, I mean, they just buy stuff and go on trips, and we have these conversations all the time. But I think on the note here, when you asked a second ago, Emily, is like, if someone's going to make $5 million over a 20-year time period and their business is worth $1.5 million, let's say, I'm just throwing, these aren't actual numbers here, but just giving concepts here, that if you were to take a piece of that $5 million and put it on your personal balance sheet over time, and you understand what your income is required for at retirement, which another factor that comes into play here is that people use their practice as their piggy bank. So they just randomly take money from it. They don't really have a plan of how they distribute funds from it. They pay off their mortgage when there's a big lump sum in the business. We see this time and time again. And then it's like they're in this position to where they don't even know what their lifestyle demands when they do sell. So it's like when you can be able to marry the two of like, okay, how much in assets should I have with a plan to what my lifestyle requires? Sometimes like people can really make it work to where they can just, again, they can just close the doors, they can give the keys away. But if they are at a latter part of their career, now it's just a matter of like, how do you kind of pick up the pieces and make the best of the circumstances here to be able to transition it? I hope that makes sense.
So what I'm understanding is that it's in your the mindset and the way that you both practice, that it's less about having a specific plan about how you're going to sell the business and who you're going to sell the business to and when you're going to do that versus being in a good enough financial shape that you can figure that out later and be okay, sort of regardless of
In a perfect world,
of what that outcome ends up being.
if you took the emotional factor out of it and we're just focusing on logic, yes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that would be the goal here. In all reality, we all are human beings, and emotions drive a lot of our decision making along the way. So it's like, in the reality of it, it's like the business, we need to account for how much of the business might make up of the plan. And even the question that comes in here of like people, when you ask them, how much is your business worth? Sometimes there's this inflated thought of what their business actually worth. So like, think about it. You buy a coffee cup for $20, brand new, and then you go to resell it. Well, you're not going to get $20 for that coffee cup. You might be able to get $5, let's say. And there's like a disconnect from what the people think of what the price is versus the value of the business. And like, I was even chatting with someone prior to this to where, the biggest dilemma that we have from associates buying into a business is that the people who are selling are commanding or demanding so much for the sale of their business because they lack a lot of planning on the other side of it, that they need every dollar they can squeeze out of it. So then it puts them in a position of like, can I even get enough money to buy this business?
Right.
Because it's just not generating enough money.
Right. Yeah. That was a question I was going to ask about. And on another episode with Dr. Peter Weinstein, I don't know if you heard that episode, we sort of touched on this a little bit, this idea of like practice valuations and EBITDA and how that has like changed so much over the years. And he pointed out that a few years ago during COVID, like the sort of the number of times EBITDA you would need to buy a practice was even higher. Maybe it was even before COVID, but it's come down a little bit, but it's still potentially higher than it was in decades past. So that can potentially make it harder for sort of an individual associate to maybe purchase a practice.
Well, but that comes back to what we're saying.
Yeah.
Right. If you're completely independent of the practice sale, because you've built up your own balance sheet strategically over time,
right?
Then okay, you get 5 times multiple versus a 10. What does it matter? Right. It's the cherry on the cake, right? You might get a bigger cherry, but the cake is still the same. You're still able to continue your life the way that you wanted to. And I think that this does take decades for a lot of people. I mean, we're not talking about something you do overnight. Now, people who start later in life, it is what it is. You've got to do as much as you can with the time that you have left because you can't go back in time. But I think, this idea, people forget that the valuation of a veterinary practice is variable. It's just like the valuation of Apple or Procter and Gamble or any other company that you see that's on an exchange, right? Because the valuations of those companies change every day as the company changes. And it's the same with a vet practice. I mean, those valuations change frequently.
Well, when you think about it, like the value too of EBITDA or net income profits, the numbers were driven up very high recently purely because there's all these people, they're backed with capital. Right. They've got tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to where, they're coming in here buying something with the idea that business is going to grow into it. So they're paying 15 to 20 times EBITDA. Some of them I've seen like 25, I think I've seen at one point. But then like if you're trying to sell it to another person who doesn't have that backing of capital and they're not financially independent and they're looking to buy something with taking on someone else's money, oftentimes as a bank, they're having to borrow the money. The bank is now going to look at it and be like, well, the business generates X. Can X pay back Y?
Yeah.
And if X can't pay back Y, then we're not going to lend it. So it's like, if X can support 1.5, but the owner wants 2.5, either the person buying it needs to come up with $1 million or they got to figure out how to get the owner to come down and sell it for less money. And they can't sell it with the idea of, well, it's going to be worth 2.5 when you take it over. It doesn't matter.
It only matters.
We're talking about right now, like what is it generating in income, right?
And that, so a specific question that I had that was submitted by a member of the AHA community said, so much of the focus in today's market is on positioning a practice for sale to a corporate buyer. I would be interested in hearing about alternatives to selling to private equity. Of course, we all know that a sale to an associate is an option, but perhaps the speakers could address other sale options. For example, I believe I read about a practice owner who sold her practice to her employees. So this particular person wrote that they were presumably thinking about selling their practice, but wanted to at least explore opportunities other than selling to a corporation. So you mentioned before kind of like selling within the practice or selling to outside of the practice, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can. So I think it's a combination of things. It's not just the quantitative; it's also the qualitative. What options present to somebody has a lot to do with their practice, the people within the practice, what motivates them, what keeps them coming to work, and what's going to keep them coming to work beyond your ownership. And I think the question is so much deeper than like what are the options are endless. There's an unlimited amount of options. Like there's no possible way you could list out but every single person probably has a handful.
Mm-hmm.
Because it all depends on area of the country, the people in your business, when you're going to exit, how old are the people that are going to buy your business. There's a lot of those variables that I think a professional should help you narrow down maybe the 3 to 5 biggest potential things that you could do, and then plan for every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you create a plan that has a plan when nothing was according to plan, so that if that first choice falls away because the person that you thought was going to buy the business ended up needing to move to Italy because their spouse, they got married to somebody who was Italian, and now they're going to, that actually happened to somebody.
That's a very specific example.
It's like I had a successor, they're moving to Italy and I'm kind of out of luck now. Right. If you have things like that come up, or, I mean, I just talked to somebody yesterday where their employee, one of their employees died. That's not something anybody really kind of plans for.
Yeah.
So, and that was like maybe last year, I think. And so I think, the options are there potentially for the people that are in front, but as far as how you gear up and what you need to do with the practice, that is going to all be dictated based upon your options.
Yeah. Tom, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Going back on the thought about selling a practice to an employee or an associate or a group of employees, if they're trying to do it on the spot and they're trying to command as much as they possibly can, there are going to be limitations on what is available for them to get in funding for the business. And, they could default to what they call a seller's note, to where the person who is selling the business is going to take on the obligation of the loan, air quotes, loan. And it's basically with the promise of taking the profits the business generates to then pay back that loan. It tends to be one of the least favored ways, I would say, in my opinion, and from past experience, purely because it keeps the existing seller on the hook of like, hey, if this person drives this business into the ground, I'm going to have to come back because I might not get my money. There's a double taxation that happens there. So like as the business makes money, the new owner has to pay taxes. Then they pay the seller, who then has to also pay taxes. So then there's like this drag on, a tax drag that's on the sale proceeds that's happening here. In a perfect world, I mean, where we've seen the highest probability of success to where the owner gets what they're looking for and the person who is buying the practice gets what they want, is at least a 10-year runway. If we have a 10-year runway in a perfect world, we can be able to show ways to be able to minimize taxes, figure out a way how to transition it based off of performance metrics, be able to get a good amount of money into the seller's pocket. 5 years, it's squeezing it a little tight, but there are opportunities there. Maybe there's even like a standpoint we get it going, and then like there is an agreement that's put in play, and then eventually they get 40% ownership. They get the rest in a loan from a bank. They buy out the rest from the seller, and they call it a day. And there's ways to do this in a very favorable way. And I think I'm going to go back again here where I find that the most challenging part, I mean, I read all these Facebook groups too online where people are trying to sell their practice. The issue is as well, like it's a one doctor practice. One doctor practice. If that doctor is gone though, like, well, are the patients, the clients going to want to keep coming back and seeing that new doctor?
Right.
So all of a sudden, Dr. Seeko is there and I'm now in the practice and I'm doing, no one knows who I am. Like, what kind of hit is this practice going to take, which is a risk to the person buying that business. And then at the same note here, it's like some of these people are just like, I'm trying to get whatever I can from it. And Other times, there's on the other note here, I will say probably 75% of the time, I think from a single doctor practice, maybe 80%, they are depending on getting as much as they possibly can for the sale of that business. They're trying to get every dollar they can. So they might be trying to squeeze 2.5, but it's only worth 1.5 million to a bank.
Gotcha.
And it's like, where do you come up with the difference here? The longer we have, we could probably make that a reality for you. But if you're like, I want out of this yesterday, you're probably going to have to change your perspective and reality in your paradigm, because this is what it is. You're going to have to work longer, whatever the case is. And I hate to be the person to say that, but this is just, time is the biggest killer in the entire equation.
Yeah.
You can't just kind of pull a rabbit out of thin air and like, here it is. So,
and when you say runway, I just want to be clear. Are you talking about just sort of the time that the seller is taking to kind of plan their sale, or is it like the seller and a particular buyer kind of working together to make it happen?
it's when they want out. So like, let's say that the person wants out at 65, they're now 55, where there's a plan put in place to progressively transition ownership over the next 10 years by the time they're 65 to get them fully out.
So already
Maybe
having
sooner,
a particular
just depends.
buyer in mind. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think it's very hard for succession planning in particular. You really want to have the person that you know is going to take, and like have at least some sort of, I'd say, soft understanding with that person that's their plan.
Yeah, I've certainly heard plenty of stories about soft understandings that didn't materialize into anything. But I suppose that's kind of the risk involved in any kind of
Well, the principal reason
business.
from what we see is like the person that's selling wants to sell, but is not in the financial position to sell.
Right.
So if they plan properly, then they will be in the position to sell. And it won't be, okay, I got to sell to corporate because I need every dollar.
Yeah.
Because I didn't plan for my own personal plan myself in a way that allows me the freedom to do that. And so people get put in chains effectively from not having a plan. So so going back to that question, when do you plan for your exit? You want to plan for your exit the day after you own the business.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that this is going to take a while for you to create the independence that is necessary in order for you to have the option on who you want to sell to.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And I was just gonna go ahead. Yes, Tom.
When you think about the bigger, I mean, I'm sure there might be some naysayers on here too that might be like, well, I'm just going to grow a business that's going to be like really, really good. And like, I will tell you statistically, when you really think about it, where most people are from a planning perspective, it's going to take time to be able to build up to get to that part of independence. And there are some people I've known that were, they produce so much income so quickly, their business becomes so valuable. No matter what they do, they sell their business, they're going to get plenty of money to produce what their lifestyle is. And those people, like, now it's the matter of like, are they getting the best use out of those sale proceeds, or are they just kind of taking it and throwing it somewhere and hoping they get some interest off of it? But as most people, if they really think about what their plan requires, and if their goal is 50, instead of waiting until you're 50 to now try to figure out how to get out of the business, you should be looking at it when you get into the business to then prepare to get out by 50.
Right. To at least be kind of in good financial shape so that you can
That's right.
kind of take those next steps. I was just going to add too that I wrote an article, it's probably about a year or so ago, maybe a little bit more, about a practice owner who had a group of practices. And I think she was still actively growing while she was doing this. But while she was growing and creating new practices, she created an employee co-op and was gradually selling the business to the co-op that was owned by her employees. So she was continuing to grow, but then also like starting her exit strategy, and got buy-in from her whole team while she was doing it, with the understanding that they would take over this this business. And then to your point earlier, I saw a news story, I think it was just last week, where it was this rural large animal, mixed animal practitioner who could not find anyone to buy his practice, and he gave it away. He kind of put ads out, and he got like a new grad in, and he's doing some mentoring, and the new grad's like, this is a great deal. I'm getting his truck, I'm getting his practice for free. And the seller was like, well, it's not ideal, but got to do something. So
I mean, there's people, I remember talking to someone who bought a depressed practice. Literally, the person just closed the doors, walked away. They bought the building. 2 years later, walked in, there's still trash in the trash can,
geez.
and like everything, like they just literally just closed the building and walked away from it. Like they were done with it and they couldn't deal with it anymore. Like there are pretty extreme examples like that.
Yeah, certainly not ideal. Not what anyone else
But-
want to
and
work
now-
towards.
I will say, from a planning perspective too, the devil's almost always in the details.
Yeah.
Like there are some T's to be crossed and I's to be dotted when it comes to like giving away your business. And so I think hopefully the people that can do that or do that, at least consult attorneys and CPAs, because there's a lot of there's a lot of risk that you might be passing on to somebody if you just literally hand them the keys.
Right.
It sounds to me like even that guy, it's like, okay, here's the truck, here's the, like, you're giving the guy everything. It's like, well, did you give him the business? Because now whatever liability existed in the business is now transferred to that new owner potentially.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of like, just making sure that if you have a plan, then it's like, okay, the execution of that plan, the details are almost as important as the strategy itself. And I think especially when it comes to co-ops and, if you've got a group of employees that are buying the practice, business interruption planning, it becomes infinitely valuable, because if anybody gets a divorce or loses a license or gets a DUI, there's a potential business interruption that occurs with that, especially when you're talking about ownership being transferred. And so there's a lot of things that I think a lot of people kind of just do things without kind of having someone to kind of play chess with the pieces and say, okay, where could this thing go wrong? How do I build a plan that has a plan when nothing goes according to plan? And then focusing on how to structure that plan that way, as opposed to, hey, I'm just going to do this and we're going to do it and it's just going to unfold over time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Very important to kind of plan for the worst case scenario and have the right people advising you on both sides, whether you're buying, selling, giving, all those things. And I wanted to get to another question on a little bit of a different topic that was submitted. And this question was about practice value and real estate. So this person said, I'm curious about practice value with and without real estate. How does a practice value grow over time without real estate? Like if you don't own the real estate, and how does it change the stability of the investment if there's real estate versus no real estate? Tom, do you want to start off on that one?
Yeah, I'll ping this over to CJ.
Okay.
I think just my thoughts on this are they're independent of each other. The real estate really can help from a perspective in retirement for income. There are a lot of people, though, that will, let's say a few years into retirement, they're tired of dealing with the real estate and often want to find alternatives to generate income for them.
And oftentimes, when we have clients who are transitioning into or out of a business that has real estate versus business without real estate versus business with real estate, the package deal does change. Like even how the bank views some things. Like I've watched bank. I think this is a question that probably is more for a certified valuation analyst or for even the banks or the institutions that you're going through from a lending perspective on who's going to buy the business, because I've seen it go a lot of different ways. And the details matter in the context of this. Generally speaking, I want business owners to own the actual location if they can. If they don't have to rent, I usually try to say like, hey, let's go ahead and buy this commercial property. If you're going to operate it in for the next 20 years, might as well. And if they have hesitation, it's kind of like a home. Like if you think you're going to be living in somewhere for the next 10 years, like buy the home. If you think you're going to maybe stay for the next 5 years, like you're not even sure, it's kind of like, well, maybe just rent and like see how it goes. Because if you want to move down the street, then at least you have the ability to move to another location, and you have flexibility to pivot wherever you want the business to go. So I definitely think that because location matters, especially when it comes to real estate. It's all about the location. So, if people have means, and if it seems like a good idea to go ahead and buy the real estate, then try to go through any financial, like any lending institution, and try to get kind of leverage the assets, because cash on cash returns on real estate are, generally speaking, are going to be much more stable than if you're looking at like a pure return number on the real estate. And I think when people get to retirement, when you get to retirement, any kind of consistent income coming from any investment is going to be, you want to have a certain percentage of your total net worth in places that is going to provide consistent income. And commercial real estate is one of those main hubs that provides consistent income from month to month, especially, from the perspective of you not having to work at it, because you can sell the practice, but then rent the real estate and then collect the rental income from the new practice owner.
Okay. Yeah. I think I worked at a practice where that happened, where the practice was sold, but not the building or the land. And then there was rent paid on it to the old owner. So is that the main reason that you recommend buying the real estate if you can, is to have that as an investment opportunity that you can continue to draw income from even after the practice is sold? Yeah. Okay.
It's like the mentality of renting versus owning. It's very similar in nature. I think the commercial side tends to be a little bit more advantageous to people, to where, like, they can actually have a place to park money. It's an asset they can use at some point or another. I do believe that there are pros and cons to both sides of having it. But if you're just looking for a place to park some funds, it's a great spot. But then there are other companies out there that are acquiring veterinary real estate as well. So, like, if someone were to want to get out and sell it, they have that option. And especially the longer the term the lease is, the more advantageous and let's say the more value they might be able to get for the sale of that property, because they know there's going to be a long-term tenant that will be in that location. Usually like a 15 to 20-year lease is, if you can get one of those locked in with someone, like, that's really, it makes a lot of people
Wow.
excited.
I didn't know there was such a thing as a 15 or 20-year lease. So.
You can actually do there's actually something I learned about it the other day. 100-year leases. Apparently you can lease the land, and then you can have someone build on top of 100-year leased land.
Yeah.
I didn't, I've never really had a whole lot of experience with that until pretty recently. I say recently, it was probably about a year or so ago. But I remember hearing, like, really, you want to rent 100 years? Like, you don't want to just sell me the land. You just, like, it was a property Tom and I were trying to look at buying.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we don't want to sell it to you. We'll do 100 years lease. Like, that's crazy. I don't know about that.
I guess it could be pretty lucrative for the person who owns the land. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. All these things that I'm learning here today with you. So yeah, I really appreciate you going through some of these questions. And then the next one I have is we're kind of like getting to the end here, but I just wanted to ask kind of a general question. Like, how would you describe the future of practice ownership in veterinary medicine? Like, how, in whatever way you want to interpret that question, like, what words come to mind, or with sentiments?
I think with the millennials, it appears to me that, and this is just from the ground level, right? There's no empirical verifiable data that I can produce from this. Not right now, but it seemed like with millennials, there seemed to be a swing to the entrepreneurial. And I think that has a lot to do with our Instagram culture of people wanting to be business owners and wanting to actually kind of make their own forge their own path. But it seems like it's almost being compounded with Gen Z as I watch my daughter, who is 17 years old right now, and her friends, I talk to her friends, and they seem almost like they're continuing that more entrepreneurial type mindset of, like, how do I build something cool? And so I think that more and more veterinarians that I talk to who are getting out of school seem to be in the focus of, how do I build something cool? I think we're going to see more of an entrepreneurial vet med. And I think if schools start to continue to open up, and if schools continue to pump out more graduates, then hopefully the demand won't be so much higher than the supply, and maybe we can find some sort of equilibrium over the next couple of decades.
This is my opinion here. Take it for what it's worth. I hope this doesn't turn anyone off in any form, but just being candid about it, I think that there is this level of, with bigger organizations, the larger they get, I don't want to say the level of care kind of goes away, but it's like that veterinarians are very compassionate people. And there is this level of, like, they get thrown into this grinder to where it's like they get tired of working, 20 to 40 appointments in a day. And, people over time, like, they're peeling off and doing relief work now. And, They want to create their own gig. But then I do find on the flip side of this, people start their own business and then they get put in the grinder because they don't know how to be an owner. They become an operator. So like they're inside and they're sucked in that business. So I think the people who do say enough is enough. And I think the spotlight on it today is becoming to the part where it's like there are people who are like being empowered. They're getting excited to be like, yeah, I can go do this on my own and can be an owner. I'm definitely very hopeful for this next generation of veterinarians. I think there's a lot of opportunity for this industry to shift in a really nice way.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you're hopeful because we don't always hear hopeful messages about practice ownership in veterinary medicine. And I'm glad that you who are the experts who are advising and counseling veterinarians and practice owners on a daily basis are feeling that. And then just kind of on a related subject, I just wanted to ask each of you if you have one thing that you're excited about in the veterinary industry. Tom, do you want to go first?
I'm really excited about, I think, on our side of being able to get the word out there more with some of the industry as a whole, because I know when we started this over 10 years ago, we kept constantly hearing like, hey, you all need to be out there. We need to hear what you have to say. And there's a lot of tremendous collaborations that I know that we're working in the pipeline right now that I'm thrilled to be able to see what we can do to just empower more people that are out there to, be able to make the smart decisions on their own, or if they want to come work with us, and just more people to know about the resources that are there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yesterday we had 2 clients where their net worth crossed over $1 million.
That's amazing.
And I think that as we continue to just try to, like Tom said, like focus on helping more people in vet med. I think in vet med as a whole, not only I think are people going to get healthier from the perspective of from the financial piece, but I definitely see I'm excited to see how vet med changes, especially from the mental health perspective, because there's been kind of this like dark cloud over it, I'd say, since from when I first started learning about it back in 2014, and that dark cloud seems like it's kind of lifting up. I think as people continue to become better students of themselves and just try to understand the mental health piece and burnout and just how to live better lifestyles, I'm excited to see how just vet med as a whole becomes a much healthier, well-rounded community where the chains of being able to help more pets are taken off of them from the mental and from the financial perspective. And we're just able to see a whole lot better quality of everybody all the way around, better service to the community, better lifestyle for vets, better just everything.
I love that imagery of the chains being taken off. I think a lot of people can probably resonate with that and relate to that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for both of you for joining me today and for answering some questions. I know this is going to be really appreciated for all those out there who are looking for some of this information. And on that note, if you have any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience, or if you want to give them any information about where to follow you, where to find you, where to see kind of what you're up to next, I'd love to have you share it.
One, I'm very happy to be here to help support the people, and just like thank you for inviting us to come talk with you. And if anyone does want to chat, you're always more than welcome to reach out to us. Go to our website, flveterinaryadvisors.com. Go to our contact us page, fill out the information. We can schedule a 15-minute phone call just to see if there's anything we can do to support your efforts. And if you're looking to nerd out, want some more financial stuff, I mean, we have a podcast ourselves. We're at over 270 episodes on there. We've been doing it for quite a while. And everything from personal topics, business topics, interviews with people, you might find a lot of usefulness from that. And then you can just poke around our website. Like there's so much stuff on there that I keep forgetting how many things that we have available on our website. So if you're just like needing a place to get lost, and our YouTube is amazing. I love all the videos going on there.
Get lost in some financial information.
Was it financial YouTubery? Is that where you?
Well, look, I know we all sometimes like to listen to ourselves talk. I mean, let's just call it out for what it is. But I know some people really do enjoy what we have to say, and I mean, hopefully that we get compliments all the time that like we make financial stuff very easy to understand and interpret. So I think if you start listening to our shows and just start getting more engaged with it, you might learn a few things or another and actually really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think the Smarter Vet Financial podcast, when we started that back in 2020, there was kind of this like, are people going to listen to this? And then it surprised us as far as how many people actually go and listen to the Smarter Vet Financial podcast on a consistent basis. Like people are actually returning and they continue to listen. So
Yeah, that
we
doesn't
keep
surprise
pumping
me.
it out. It's been 5 years, so we're just going to keep pumping them out. And I guess we're going to have 6 years of material here soon. But yeah, it's if people want to find us, we're on the internet. I mean, you literally can Google us. You should be able to find us. Although if you Google CJ Burnett, I'm not the guy that does the 80s techno music. Just going to throw that out there.
Noted.
So if you Google CJ Burnett, that's not me. I wish it was. I mean, it's pretty good stuff, but it's unfortunately not.
Good to know. Well, congratulations for all the things that you've accomplished and all the things you're working on. We'll look forward to keeping up with everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Emily.